These words adapted from Psalm 98. O sing a new song to the Eternal. Shout praise, all earth, break into music and song. Praise the Eternal with lyre and song. Let the sea and all within it thunder praise, the world and its inhabitants. Let the rivers clap their hands, let the mountains sing in chorus. O sing a new song to the Eternal.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. My name is Cynthia Asphrodites. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the worship associate for today's service. This is a welcoming congregation, and we are always working on how to better welcome and care for one another. If this is your first time joining us, we are so glad you've come. And whoever you are, we welcome you in the fullness of who you are. As we begin, we take this moment to acknowledge that our church occupies unceded Chochenyo and Muwekma Ohlone land. As community and church members, we continue to benefit from the seizure and occupation of this land. We also want to affirm that this is not simply performative, but is deeply felt and is a commitment toward action. For more information, please visit uucb.org/indigenous. We are delighted to welcome UU Minister Matt Meyer to our worship service today. Matt is a musician and worship leader who has led hundreds of services for UU congregations across the country. He has a degree in hand drumming, and he serves as Director of Community Life for Sanctuary Boston, an innovative community of vibrant worship and connection grounded in the UU tradition. Now, please take a moment to prepare yourself and your space for our time together. You might get a candle and a way to light it so that you can join in the chalice lighting from home. Let us kindle our flames with the words of Elizabeth Harding. We Unitarians don't drink from our chalice. Instead, we use it to hold the flame. The circle of the chalice helps keep the fire small. The flame doesn't blind us. It doesn't burn us. It gives us light, so we can see all the different things in the universe, even the invisible ones, because the Unitarian Universalist flame is a light of learning. The flaming chalice is a symbol of learning and love. It's our symbol, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. Now, I invite you to share in the comments where you are by writing, "I carry the flame in," whatever town or city you are joining us from. Please join us now in singing our opening song, Blessed Motion.
Our opening hymn this morning is Blessed Motion by Annie Zylstra. She wrote this song when she was inspired by the words of Martin Prechtel, who spoke of what it was like to have survived an earthquake in Guatemala. Prechtel spoke of what it was like to have the ground beneath his feet, that which had always been so permanent and so solid, suddenly rise up in motion. He said that the myth of believing in solid ground is a myth believed by those that live on the earth, rather than as a part of it. I know for the last year now I've been constantly searching for some sense of grounding, even as it feels like the ground beneath my feet is constantly shifting. If that's been true for you as well, I invite you into the spirit of this song, to be in motion together with the earth. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. All moves on in perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean. All moves on. That little part two more times. Perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean. All moves on in perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground. I saw the ocean motion, the waves of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground. Until I saw the earth in motion, in the waves of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground. Until I saw the earth in motion, steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the waves of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion.
Please join me in saying our covenant. Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
Desmond the mouse lived in the most beautiful meadow in all the land. Every morning, Desmond would wake with the sunrise and spend the day playing in the meadow. And every evening, Desmond would go to sleep in the middle of that meadow under the beautiful starry sky. One night, though, Desmond awoke when it was still dark out. He tried to roll over to a more comfortable spot, but something wasn't right. Desmond realized that his tail was stuck right to the ground and beginning to throb with pain. He felt behind him, and there was a huge boulder that seemed to have fallen in the middle of the meadow just on his tail. Desmond pushed on the boulder and he tugged on his tail. And he pushed on the boulder and tugged on his tail, and he pushed and tugged and pushed and tugged. And when he was out of breath and had just about given up, he saw a giraffe nearby in the grass. Good news, he thought. "Oh, giraffe," Desmond cried. "It seems that a boulder has fallen in the middle of the meadow just on my tail. I'm stuck and it hurts. Could you please push the boulder just a few inches in the other direction so I could go free?" The giraffe looked at Desmond and laughed the way giraffes do. "Silly mouse," said the giraffe. "That's no boulder. That's an elephant that has fallen asleep just on your tail in the middle of the meadow." "Well, thank goodness," said Desmond, a little relieved. "If you could just wake the elephant gently and ask him to roll over a few inches in the other direction, I could go free." "Well," replied the giraffe, "you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this." Desmond replied quietly, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." The giraffe wandered off, and Desmond tried calling out to wake the elephant up, but those giant ears were just too far away on the other side of that giant elephant body. So again, Desmond pushed on the elephant and tugged on his tail, and he pushed and tugged and pushed and tugged. When he was out of breath and had just about given up again, he saw a gazelle wander by. "Oh, gazelle," he cried. "Oh, gazelle, it seems that an elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of the meadow. I'm stuck and it hurts. I wonder if you could gently wake him up and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction so I could get free." "Well," said the gazelle, "you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this." Desmond replied almost to himself this time, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." Desmond tried again to call out to the elephant. He tried again to push the animal away. He tried again and again to tug his little tail free, but it was no use. When he was out of breath and had just about given up for the last time, he saw another mouse wander through the meadow. Desmond called out, and the mouse scurried over and introduced himself. "My name is Nelson. Nelson, this giant elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of the meadow. I wonder if you might run over and call out to his giant elephant ears and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction so I could go free." "Of course," said Nelson. Nelson ran all the way to the other end of that giant elephant body, and he called up to those giant elephant ears at the top of that giant elephant head. But the elephant didn't budge. The elephant heard Nelson's small voice far away, but just felt too comfortable to move. Nelson ran back to Desmond and, a little out of breath, said, "I have an idea. Stay right here." He ran off, leaving a confused look on Desmond's face. A little while later, though, Desmond saw Nelson emerge through the tall grass, and he wasn't alone. Nelson had found 3 mouse friends to help him, and each of them had found another 3 friends. The whole group of them ran over to that giant head at the other end of that giant elephant, and one mouse scrambled up on the shoulders of another, and another mouse scrambled up on her shoulders, and one after another they climbed up, until the whole group of them had formed a long mouse ladder right up the side of that elephant. At last, Nelson climbed up the shoulders of all of his mouse friends, one on top of the other, until he was all the way on top of that giant elephant head, standing right next to that giant elephant ear. "Excuse me," he called out right into that ear. "It seems you've fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of this meadow. I wonder if you could just roll over a few inches in the other direction so he could go free." The giant elephant made a low groan. "Umph. I'm comfortable just where I am. Go away." So Nelson asked more of his mouse friends to climb up. One by one, they helped each other up the side of that elephant. One by one, they called out into that giant ear on top of that giant elephant head, and the elephant made a low groan again. "Umph. I'm comfortable just where I am. Go away." But then Nelson had an idea. He whispered to the mice, and then all at once together they yelled right into that ear, "Excuse us. It seems you've fallen asleep on our friend's tail in the middle of this meadow. Roll over just a few inches in the other direction so he could go free." This time, all of those voices together right next to his ear were just too loud to ignore. I was comfortable where I was, but I'll move over if you just agree to stop making such a racket, the elephant cried out. And then the elephant rolled over just a few inches in the other direction. Nelson and the other mice climbed up, helped each other back down, and Desmond was finally free. Together they spent the rest of the day playing in the middle of that beautiful meadow. Archbishop Desmond Tutu has said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have taken sides with the oppressor. If an elephant is standing on the tail of a mouse, the mouse will never appreciate your neutrality. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to be in covenant together, to be in relationship together, to work together to make the world a better place. We've articulated a vision of justice and equity and compassion, and we've named that vision in our principles and in our communities. And so sometimes we take sides for justice. We take sides for equity and for compassion. Sometimes, perhaps even always, we work together to side with love.
We've come to the time in our service that we make for the tender places within ourselves and for each other. We lift up and hold the joys, the sorrows, the cares, and the challenges we may each be facing. During our time of silence this morning, I invite you to share any joys or sorrows or significant milestones of your own in the comments section. May we all hold all of these things shared in the collective embrace of this compassionate community. Our meditation reading this morning is by Dana Capasso. And I invite you to just listen in for whatever words may be speaking to you in terms and in the context of everything we're working with this morning. the butterfly effect. The delicate flapping wings of a butterfly have the power to set molecules of air in motion, in turn moving more molecules of air, a tiny act that is eventually capable of affecting weather patterns all the way on the other side of the planet. This notion comes from a concept within chaos theory called the butterfly effect. Simply put, the butterfly effect refers to a phenomenon in our world where a small change in one place can result in an equal or greater change elsewhere. It may seem crazy, a tiny butterfly changing global weather patterns. Not only is the butterfly effect a real scientific theory, but it's also an intriguing philosophical idea. I say this because the butterfly effect affects the way that I live and the decisions that I make in a way that no other ideas about deities or religious ideas may have ever had. I'm not a meteorologist, nor am I well versed in entomology, that is the study of bugs. But ever since learning about the butterfly effect, I've been attracted to it because it demonstrates an important principle that is often forgotten. Namely, that each of our actions has effects that are more profound than we think. Interconnection is a major theme found in nearly all of the world's religious and philosophical traditions. The interconnectedness of our universe is also one of the significant revelations found in physics. All components of matter are interconnected, interrelated, and interdependent. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm and promote our responsibility to remain aware of the interconnection through our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence. Attention to interconnectivity reminds us, despite the many socio-political forces that work to divide us from each other, that we are never alone in this world. Reminds us that each decision or action we make has reactions, and those reactions reverberate as waves moving back and forth literally across our globe. This compels us to live our lives aware of the consequences of our daily actions. From the purchases we make to personal interactions. Now, we may not always succeed, but we have to try. Our awareness of interconnectivity and efforts to work against the illusion of division remain a very important and vital spiritual practice. Now, this spiritual practice also, as the author says, gives me the ability to stand in awe of interconnection. Stand in awe of the butterfly effect and the power that comes with it. On rare occasions, I'm reminded to stop and appreciate the divinity of interconnectivity revealed before our very eyes. This is awe-inspiring. This is divine.
Channels for the streams of love, that they may broadly run, These words come to us from Mickey Scott Bay Jones in her Invitation to Brave Space. Together we will create brave space, because there is no such thing as safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and more love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. I start nearly every day with a to-do list, usually scribbled on a post-it note on the corner of my desk. Between you and me, it's usually an overly ambitious to-do list. And one thing in particular that I struggle to check off the list most days is making time for writing. It's not that I'm not dedicated. I'm so dedicated to being a writer that every day I put it on the list. I'm so dedicated that every day I read books about writing and collect story ideas and quotes and prompts so that when I do write, I'll have lots of inspiration. I'm so dedicated that every day I work on other things and I finish other pressing commitments so that eventually I'll have lots of time to write. I'm so dedicated that certainly one of these days I'll start writing. One of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, talks about this, about how hard it is in fact to just sit down every day and put your butt in the chair and write. She says, "The discouraging voices will hound you. This is all piffle," they will say. And they might be right. What you are doing may just be practice, but this is how you're going to get better. Some of the best writing advice I ever got was from a teacher who told me, "For now, take a few minutes and don't write, but just write what you would write if you were going to write." I sometimes feel like in all the years since I've gotten that advice, I haven't written anything since, but I have written a lot about what I would write if I did. You might call this the practice of practicing, learning how to practice. The problem is that the finished product we might imagine for ourselves can feel too far from where we're starting. The person we would like ourselves to be can sometimes feel so far from the person we see in the mirror every day. The world as we would like it to be can feel impossibly far from the headlines we read in the news every morning. The demons of perfectionism stand in the way of good writing, just as they stand in the way of risk-taking in general, creative risk-taking in particular. And this is unfortunate because we know that creating a life for ourselves that doesn't yet exist requires some creative risk-taking. Particularly in uncertain and anxious times such as these, just showing up as your best self every day requires setting aside those discouraging voices that hound us. And on many days, while just imagining a world of justice and equity and compassion, it can feel so far beyond any horizon that we can see that it means setting aside those voices that show up and say your efforts are just piffle. When the demons of perfectionism show up like this, I try to practice the practicing of showing up, for myself and for others. Musicians know something about practicing. One of the requirements for all students at Berkeley College of Music, where I attended years ago, is 4 semesters of ear training. Ear training is learning to sight sing music just by reading the notes on a page, and learning to write down and transcribe the music just by listening to a song. Now, when I began school, I certainly knew that there were people who were capable of this kind of magic, but it seemed like some kind of Harry Potter nonsense to me. Like, you may as well ask me to sit at my desk and use my conductor's baton to turn the desk into a toad. I remember our first day of ear training class as there was a sort of nervous silence among us new students. Well, silence actually except for one student who was quite vocal in his nervousness. This one student interrupted the teacher in the first few minutes of the very first day to share that he was worried the class was going to be too advanced for him. He wanted to make it clear that he knew, in fact, not a single thing about ear training. The teacher kindly paused his introductions to explain that we'd all taken entrance exams and he was sure we'd been placed in the appropriate class. The teacher tried to continue but was interrupted again. Well, the man said, "Is this the very lowest class though? Because I need to be in the very lowest class." Some of the students in the class giggled a little bit, and you could tell our poor teacher looked around the room a little sheepishly, not really wanting to answer that yes, we were in fact a class of the most very basic students. "Well," he said, "it is Ear Training 101, so it is the lowest. There is, I guess, a class for people that have previously failed the 101, but you all are just about the lowest." Now, while some of the other students giggled, I was actually kind of glad that someone was questioning what felt to me like the absurd notion that sight singing even could be taught. I don't know what happened next for that student, but he never came back to our class. Not because anything we did on that first day was in fact too hard for him, I'm sure of it, but because I think he lacked a belief that improvement was even possible. I kept going, thinking that, well, if generations of students have done this before, it must be possible somehow, even if I personally can't see the way forward. And I made a commitment to at least practice the material. I've always remembered this other student, though, who gave up before he started. It's not just that he didn't try to become a master at ear training. It's that he didn't even try the practicing of it, which always struck me as the real loss. When discouraging voices hound me, I sometimes think of him, and I remind myself that maybe, for now, the work I'm doing is just practice. But practice is how I'm going to get better. This pandemic arrived nearly a year ago, and it has been a difficult year to be sure. A time of constant adaptation, of the ground shifting beneath us constantly. I imagine that the future, much like this past year, will be a time of learning and relearning new ways of being together, of organizing our days differently, organizing our people differently, all over again. This is a time of adaptation, and it is also a time of imagination. This is a time as we reorganize ourselves and reorganize our society. This is a time for those in power, which in some ways is all of us, to learn to play some different roles in our communities, to learn some new tunes. Particularly for white folks, this is a time to practice some new skills and learn to play some new roles in our community, a time for listening in deeper ways we haven't always done so well before, and having some hard conversations we haven't yet practiced enough. Fellow white folks, when you hear people of color making demands these days, now is a good time to practice amplifying those voices that fight to be heard elsewhere, by repeating them in calls to your representatives and colleagues and family. If you inherited wealth that was accumulated in a time of systematic racial segregation, which is true of all wealth in this country, now is a good time to practice giving it away. If your muscle memory has been to call the police when something goes wrong, now is the time to practice something different, building new skills for community safety. I won't all of a sudden do all of these things, but I will practice the doing of them. Musicians know as well as anyone that muscle memory is very real. That consistent practicing changes the very structure of our brains, rewiring our circuitry, forging new connections and new possibilities. No one is born a musician. Musicians are just the ones that learned how to practice. Even songbirds need elder birds to sing to them and teach them their tunes. Practice doesn't make music perfect, but it makes music possible. And so let us practice the practicing together, showing up for ourselves and each other to build a new world of justice and equity and compassion. Practice won't make the world perfect, but it makes a better world possible. Someday I want to be a true expert in justice and compassion. Someday I want to be well practiced at creating that brave space even when there's no such thing as safe space. Someday I want to be masterful at amplifying the voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. And someday I want to be skillful at speaking more truth and more love. Someday I want to be part of transforming our so-called justice system that has hurt so many so deeply. I want to be part of shifting our education system that so far has fast-tracked some to college and sent others to prison. And I want to be part of shifting our energy sector that has been working overtime to overheat our planet. These are daunting tasks, to be sure. On most days, learning to transcribe a symphony seems more manageable. But that's okay, because for now, I don't have to do all of those things. I just need to practice doing what I would do if I were doing them. So dear ones, don't promise to be your best self today. Just practice being the person you would be if you are being your best self. Don't try to rebuild a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice doing what you would do if you had committed to such things. You have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We all have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. So let us start together. Let us grow together. And let us practice together. May it be so, and may we make it so.
Hi, I'm Susan Langford. Where is our church during this pandemic? We know the building still exists up on the hill and that the staff and volunteers are maintaining it. It starts to feel a bit distant, though. Most of us haven't been up there in a long time. We've gotten used to all of our workarounds like online services and Zoom coffee hour, and I'm grateful that we have these things and thank the people who make them happen. It's not the same, however. I have 2 short stories to share with you, and then I'd like to connect those stories. The first was before the pandemic. My phone broke. I took it to the Apple store. I took the phone out of the case, laid it on the counter. The tech analyzed the problem and took the phone. Later, I came back to pick up my brand new phone. I put it back in the old case and went on my way. I resumed the same relationship with a different new phone. The second story. This New Year's Day, I made deliveries to some of you. I spent a few hours driving from home to home, and I was in a hurry to get it all done, but I actually got to see some of you face to face. When I got home, I had an unexpected feeling. I felt good. I felt warm. I realized how little of that feeling I've had in the last year. I want more of it. I want to be physically present with all of you, with our community. I want our relationship back. I never had a relationship with this thing, actually. It was replaceable. It's only a tool, a conduit to reach the world and the people beyond, like the device that you're looking at right now. The work of the church is to build loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service. The work is also the reward I felt when I saw your faces on New Year's Day. To do the work of the church and gain the rewards that come from it, first we have to sustain it. Soon, we hope we'll be physically together again. Please help make it possible. Pledge what you can for the work and for the reward.
Care, compassion, community have always been a hallmark of UUCB. This year, more than ever, we have felt the importance of this church in our upended lives, health challenges, and financial stresses. Together, we can sustain and support this church as our spiritual home. Here, we create loving community, inspire spiritual growth and social justice work, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service. Please consider making your pledge online today at uucb.org. On our homepage, you simply scroll down to the 2021-22 Pledge Campaign to access the electronic pledge form. Please contact the church office if you want a paper pledge form. We also hope you will continue to practice generosity with our Good Neighbor organizations. This month, we're sharing half of our offerings with the Read Aloud program to support the good work they do in our wider community. Read Aloud is a relationship-based program that fosters in children the joy and love of learning through reading and storytelling. Its goal is to build a structure of volunteers to support and improve reading outcomes for children in under-resourced schools in Richmond and nearby communities. Many members of our congregation participate in this program. Offerings of any value are received with gratitude. More details on how to give electronically will appear on your screen as our offertory begins. Thank you.
Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. Listen, my people, we bring the power. La libertad es la única bandera. Liberty is the only flag. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. No human being can ever be
Please join me in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service. It's been so good to be together today in praise and song. Before we shift to our virtual coffee hour on Zoom, I'd like to encourage you to stay informed about all that's going on in our congregation by exploring our website, uucb.org. Among other things, you can find a link in News to The Week Ahead, our weekly email newsletter, which contains lots of information about upcoming activities. Now, please join in singing our closing song, More Waters Rising.
This song was written by Sarah Lynch Thomason, a climate justice activist in Appalachia. This song, like I think the best music and perhaps like the best faith communities, calls us not to turn away from the crises of our times, but to face the hard and difficult things together and to move forward together. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more waters rising, they will find their way to me. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know. There are more fires burning, they will find their way to me. There are more fires burning, this I know, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know. There are more mountains falling, this I know, this I know. There are more mountains falling, this I know. There are more mountains falling, they will find their way to me. There are more mountains falling, this I know, this I know. There are more mountains falling, this I know. I will wade through the water, this I know, this I know. I will wade through the water, this I know. I will wade through the water when they find their way to me. I will wade through the waters, this I know, this I know. I will wade through the waters, this I know. I will walk through the fire, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fires, this I know. I will walk through the fires when they find their way to me. I will walk through the fires, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fires, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains when they find their way to me. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more waters rising, they will find their way to me. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. Beloveds, don't promise to be your best self today. Just be the person you would be if you were practicing being your best self. Don't try to rebuild a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice doing what you would do if you had committed to such beautiful things. You have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow, and so let us start together and grow together, and let us practice together. Go in peace, go in love, and go and be blessed as you are a blessing to others.